Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. The survival of at least 3 major caribou herds is at the center of oil and mineral development projects in Alaska. The state's largest, the porcupine herd, is on the decline and is almost a quarter the size of its peak 2 decades ago. Subsistence hunting advocates say a push to drill in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge puts them further at risk. Similar concerns factor into fights over drilling on the North Slope and mining in the state's interior. We'll hear about the future of caribou in Alaska right after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. The Alaska Native village of Kipnuk is at a crossroads. A powerful storm last fall destroyed homes, contaminated water, and left residents with a critical decision: rebuild in the same spot or move to higher ground. As Oyolna Naiden with the Alaska Desk reports, the conversation is just getting started.
Kipnuk resident Raina Paul fights back tears as she talks about how the remnants of Typhoon Halon ravaged her village and why relocating is so important for the next generation.
We want them to have a livable life too.
She shared her thoughts at a recent meeting in Anchorage, where more than 50 Kipnuk residents discussed the future of their community. Village Council President Daniel Paul says it will be up to the residents to decide.
I had many calls from our club members. Half of them want to stay, half want to go.
Kipnuk is about 4 miles inland from the Bering Sea coast and was once home to about 700 people. Nearly everyone evacuated after the October storms. Paul says about 100 residents are back now, working to rebuild. But there is a lot to do. The storm demolished about 150 homes, wiped out vital infrastructure, and left lands and water contaminated. During the meeting, residents spoke predominantly in Yupik, asking what relocation could look like. They asked about how to choose a new site and secure land ownership. And they pondered what it would take to set up critical infrastructure at the new place. Village Council Vice President Chris Alexei says that would include a school, airport, and health clinic.
This isn't going to be an easy process to do, but we have to do that.
Village officials say the relocation process can take years. Kipnuk elder David Carl says he supports relocating.
We're not thinking about ourselves, who we are now. We just want to fight for our upcoming generations.
But for Daniel Paul, Kipnuk is home.
I was raised there and I'll stay there.
Paul says the meeting was just the first step in the relocation discussion, and residents have a lot of factors to weigh. But Kipnuk leaders also feel a sense of urgency. Paul says the village expects only one substantial influx of federal funding. To make the best use of it, he says they need to decide soon whether they want to stay or move. In Anchorage, I am Alona Naiden.
For decades, public health officials in Navajo County, Arizona, have been helping tribal members and elders who were not born inside a hospital with obtaining birth certificates. As KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrazio reports, they've seen a spike in applicants following reports of Native people getting caught up in ICE crackdowns nationwide.
Last year, 305 residents applied for delayed birth certificates across Navajo County, 2/3 of which covers tribal lands belonging to Navajos, Hopis, and White Mountain Apaches. Violet Redbird Nez, who is Kiowa in Dene, is a vital records specialist with County Public Health. She treks to Kayenta quarterly to help residents get documented, and for the last 3 months, Redbird Nez says there's an uptick.
They're worried that they might get deported.
There were 22 applicants last month alone. Once the paperwork is filled out, it typically takes 6 weeks.
And it's so endearing to know that they came by to say, hey, thank you for helping me get my birth registered. I'm legal now, is what they say.
For National Native News, I'm Gabriel Pietrazio.
This week, U.S. Senators Catherine Cortez Masto and Mike Rounds introduced the Stronger Engagement for Indian Health Needs Act. The legislation elevates the role of the Indian Health Service Director to Assistant Secretary for Indian Health within the Department of Health and Human Services. Senators say elevating the position would give IHS greater authority to address the healthcare needs of Native communities. I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Support by the American Indian College Fund, providing millions of dollars of scholarships to Native students every year. Applications are accepted through May 31st at collegefund.org or by phone at 800-766-FUND.
Hear that? Tribal college faculty do so much, one can't say it all here. Nothing but respect. Visit mostthorough.jobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Late in the Biden administration, representatives of Alaska Native residents on Alaska's North Slope signed an agreement with the federal government to protect an area that is key for subsistence caribou hunting. The agreement is meant to offset the effects of a pending major oil drilling operation known as the Willow Project in the National Petroleum Reserve. But now the Trump administration is removing those protections. Subsistence hunting advocates say it will further harm the population of this important species that are declining all over the state. The nearby village of Nuiqsut is suing the federal government. They're among a growing number of Alaska Native stakeholders taking legal action to protect caribou and the environment they depend on. We're going to hear the perspective from the village today. You can join us, listeners. Just call 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us now from Nuiqsut, Alaska, is Rosemary Atongarak. She is the former mayor of Nuiqsut, and she is Inupiaq. Rosemary, good morning, and welcome to Native America Calling.
Good morning. We're having a little bit of a blow up here, but it's calming down a little bit.
Okay, yeah. Well, we got a lot to talk about in addition to the weather here. I mean, here, Nuiqsut's Village Corporation, the city of Nuiqsut, and the tribal government all suing the Interior Department over these caribou protections we're going to talk about today. Now, they allege that the administration violated federal law by canceling a program to protect the Teshekpuk Lake area. Can you tell us about the importance of this region?
For our village, it's all about the geology that is in existence there. The Teshekpuk Lake is the largest lake on the North Slope. The northeast corner is a very narrow area, 5 to 30 miles, that is where the caribou migrate along the coast for insect relief in the summer. They move from Barrow area down towards Nuiqsut, moving along the coast. The Willow Project put development with 3 million transects between our community and the migration. We now have planes, boats, trucks, heavy equipment, off-road vehicles that are moving in this area in between the migration and our community. We have worked with the federal government for decades in the process of this national energy policy, and we knew the importance of this area for our community. It's a high subsistence use area. We knew that the sprawl of industry has continued to spread from Prudhoe Bay towards our village. Over 1,000 sites have already been drilled related to oil and gas. But this development is in a very prime area. The southern arm of the Willow Project moves the development right to the edge of the southern corner of Teshekpuk Lake. So not only do we have impacts to the summer migration, but the spring migration. The caribou move from inland up through the tundra, up past Teshekpuk Lake into the calving grounds. And if the caribou cannot get through this area to have their imprinting with their calves being born in the areas, they're not going to come back to this area. And so for us, it's about protecting what's normally gone through this area, the migration through the generations, not only for our community, but there's 40 communities nearby that also depend on the migration through this area. If the migration is deflected and the caribou do not come through that northeast corner, Tashukbuk Lake is very large. By the time they get to the south side of the lake, they will not move towards our community. They will go further south as their migration continues. So these are tremendous concerns for our community. When we work through this process, we have tried many variables to try to protect our way of life, putting in recommendations to restrict how industry engages in the way that they develop this area. But it always comes down to who gets to stay at the table longest. We go to a meeting, we talk about our concerns, and then the process moves away from our community and others are at the table. When our priorities are left behind, who is there to negotiate for the importance of what we're putting forward? It's not the same priorities as industry who gets to stay at the table longer.
Rosemary, Tashukbuk caribou herd. Now, I understand this is one of the largest caribou herds in Alaska. What are you hearing from?
There are 3 herds. Tashukbuk Lake is a smaller herd. It's around Tashukbuk Lake. It's like 70,000, but it's a stationary herd. It stays around Tashukbuk Lake. The central and the western are larger.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Well, what are you hearing from community members about the trends with the herd over the last few years in its current state right now? How healthy is it?
We've been very concerned because of the continued decline in the animals. The numbers have gone down tremendously of these 3 herds. We do not have restrictions on the calving grounds. On the Canadian side, the porcupine herd has protections to their calving area. Their numbers have not declined. We're very concerned by failing to protect the calving grounds. It's contributing to the decline. But it's the cumulative effect of everything that's happening. Not only are we having land use changes, but we're having changes to the climate and the environment. When you have rains in November, December, and January, it goes onto the snow. It creates a barrier when it freezes and makes it much harder for the caribou to dig down to their lichen that they're going to eat. And so these kind of issues that are compounding with the rapidity of change, you've got torrential rains that are happening and rapid erosion that is destroying the riverbank and the ocean edge. And these kinds of concerns are really concerning, that it's just continue business as normal and not restrict some of these activities when there's obviously real serious issues that are occurring within our communities. As your radio show talked about, having villages relocate, these are some real serious issues that our whole world needs to take into account and recognize that these are not changes that we're contributing to. Our small villages do not contribute the tons of emissions that are changing our environment and the way that we live.
Rosemary, these protections now that are being removed, can you explain how they were meant to mitigate any potential harm to the caribou from the Willow Project?
We have had development throughout the industrial field, from Prudhoe Bay, the Park River Unit, all the way through the Colville River, and now moving out to Tashukbuk Lake. The continued sprawl creates tremendous infrastructure that impacts the nearshore environment, the inshore environment, wherever these developments activities are occurring. But it's this continued sprawl that is causing us tremendous concern. When you have ice roads that are being created with a few feet in between and you have multiple rows, when the caribou are trying to move through these areas, it becomes very stressful for cow and calf pairs. We've witnessed as the industry ramps up their activity, when the caribou are starting to move, if we don't put restrictions like making them slow down, making them caravan, making them absolutely stop to allow the herd to move through these, caribou and calves can get separated. If the calves get separated from the cows and they're not rejoined, the calf has a very dim likelihood of surviving. But it's the continued stress on these animals while they're moving. In the spring, they're getting ready to move to the calving ground. And so when you're putting all of this stress while these cows are pregnant, it's not easy to get to the calving grounds with the pregnancy in good stages. So we're really worried about what this does to the health of the animals and to the health of the people who depend on these animals for feeding our families. We've had deflections of the herd. We've had deflections with whaling from oil and gas activities. When our families do not have the resources that we work so hard to put away to prepare for the hard, harsh winters when our animals move away, it's a very, very dim, dark winter if you don't have a full ice cellar. I've given away food repeatedly when we've had no food in the ice cellar. When they put seismic activity 100-mile radius around our village, immediately the hunting went from just a few miles to over 100 miles away. The hardship that puts on those hunters, young hunters traveling greater distances, increased risk for injury, damages to their bodies from traveling on rough terrain, and the risk of breaking down equipment and not making it back, increased search and rescue missions.
All right.
The effort.
Rosemary, we're going to take a short break. We'll come back and we're going to talk a lot more with you. Really fascinating conversation with Rosemary Atongarak, who is the former mayor of Nuiqsut, Alaska. And we are learning about protections that are coming down that were in place to guard a very, very important caribou herd that Rosemary's community depends on for a subsistence lifestyle. Phone lines are open for folks who would like to join us. Just call 1-800-996-2848. Tradition and contemporary creative expression meet in Native-led gallery openings around the country, including an artistic celebration of coastal Salish creation stories at the Tidelands Gallery in Seattle. We'll hear about that and the start of a year-long streaming film festival. That's all on the next Native America Calling.
Support by the American Indian College Fund. The American Indian College Fund provides millions of dollars of scholarships to thousands of Native students every year. Tribal citizens of every age and experience are eligible. The deadline for applications is May 31st, and you can find everything you need to apply at collegefund.org. That's collegefund.org, or by phone at 800-766-FUND. Education is the answer.
We're glad you're with us today on Native America Calling. We are hearing about ongoing threats to caribou, an important component to Alaska Native subsistence hunting. Populations of caribou are decreasing, and a renewed push to develop oil and gas drilling and mining plays into the species' overall survival. What role do caribou play in your life? Maybe you are listening right now and you are in Alaska and you have insights to share. Call us, 1-800-996-2848. Or maybe there are similar fights related to jobs and the environment where you live. You can call us as well, 1-800-996-2848. We have Rosemary Atongarak on the line in Nuiqsut, Alaska. And Rosemary, one feature of the agreement with the Biden administration that I want to talk about has to do with land that was set aside, about 1 million acres. Why is it necessary to protect such a wide swath of land?
For us, this is the high subsistence use area for our community. We have many hunters that travel into this area many times to harvest. The animals don't stay in one area, so we need a large area to be able to go into this area and be able to harvest our needs. But it's also because these animals need this area to be able to browse and graze and do the things that they need to do to renew the population in these areas. For us, it's always been about our highest subsistence use. We've tried to put protections in other areas, but we haven't always had the enforcement. And so we recognized that we needed to get stronger and create better protections that give us better control of the changes that our community will face.
Okay. Rosemary, what is the status of the Willow Project right now, and does it provide jobs for community members?
The Willow Project is still currently being developed. They have been moving drill rigs this season. As of January, we had one topple over. The rig is still on the ground. They have moved other drill rigs in to try to get out to the Willow Project. There are multiple construction that has happened. The gravel mining has happened. There's infrastructure with pipe and VSMs, the support members for the pipeline, as well as there's infrastructure related to the development central processing unit and the various staging activities with heavy equipment and personnel camps that have already started construction out there.
Okay. And are there jobs either currently or possibly in the future for community members at Willow Project?
We have been working with the process around us and try to create jobs. We've worked with our village corporation and regional corporations to create contracts to work with the industrial process around us. With that process, we do have people that go out and work with the spill response, with the working in the camp as bull cooks, working in the sites for stick pickers, cleaning up the sites. We also have people that work with ice road development and the activities associated with that. Do we have as many jobs as they have promised? Never.
Okay. All right. Now, the head of the village corporation said the Interior Department did not consult with leadership before canceling this agreement. Nuxut leadership, that is. Any thoughts with regard to how the Trump administration will handle consultation with you folks going forward?
We're very concerned. There has been no respect for the government-to-government relationship that should occur between tribes and the government. We're very concerned that there was not the appropriate consultation with this government to rescind other protective measures, like we worked really hard to get a natural gas, oil and gas regulatory process to restrict the flaring of gas near our community. We got it with the Biden administration just to have Trump rescind the regulation. So we're very concerned that he does not regard communities and people in the decisions he made. And we're very concerned as the generations of cost that will occur to our village. As we went through the Repsol blowout and then the CD1 blowout, it is up for our village to protect our DNA, and this government will not protect our DNA.
Rosemary, you've been one of the most vocal opponents of this project, and there are others in your community who believe that there can be a balance between development and protecting natural resources. Has your position shifted at all over the years?
I've had to work through so many things, and then to have these serious events occur, it's greatly concerning because this administration has an atmosphere of safety failures. And when we had a blowout and you have a rig topple over and they just keep marching forward with resource development, it's very concerning when your village is suffered through these events. We're watching increasing health disorders with respiratory disease, neurological disorders, thyroid disorders. You have tons of emissions that are occurring, 1.7 million pounds of nitrous oxide since 2017 per year. These chemicals that get emitted with the industry cause reactions in our bodies. They're very similar to our hormone system, the endocrine system that turns on our systems in our body. So when these chemicals are coming into the air and it causes our body to trigger responses because they're very much like our own hormone systems, it's very concerning about what's happening to the people in the health that we need to have for the future generations to continue to thrive.
And Rosemary, in addition to the health concerns that you're voicing, what about just the overall impact that the Willow Project has had or could potentially have on your culture and other community aspects that I imagine people are very committed to and very concerned about?
Yeah, it is very concerning. We had tried to do our hide tanning workshop that we're doing this week, the year that we had the 100-mile seismic radius around our community, we would have had to taught the hide tanning course on paper. You have to have our animals to teach our children how to harvest, how to prepare our foods, how to store our foods, how to share them amongst our generations, and how we continue to share the stories with the generations to come to prevent the hardship we have experienced in our lifetime from them experiencing them also. So we don't want to teach how to tan a hide from a book. We want to be able to prepare our caribou skins and make the crafts that we depend upon to keep our families warm in this environment with the resources that we have. Things that come from man-made are not the same and do not have the same protections as our traditional gear.
Sure. And that really begs the question, Rosemary, what do you see? What are your vision here in terms of the future for caribou in the region if some of these events and these actions continue in the direction they seem to be headed right now?
When we had to deal with seismic activity at Camden Bay and it diverted the whales, when we had to deal with seismic activity 100-mile radius around our community, those were devastating years as a community health aide. Having to deal with the response from community members with young hunters committing suicide, having domestic violence and the problems that happen with families when they're having insecurities and inability to prepare and plan a future, it's very devastating as a health aide. When you have the only clinic and you have to open up the door every day and people are coming to the clinic every day and you don't have the appropriateness of food in the food bank or even a food bank to access food from, you get very creative and do what you can, pulling food out of your own ice cellar, your own freezer, taking food out of your own cart when you buy food for your family and sharing them with others. But you get to a point when even you don't have enough to keep sharing with the village, and there's nobody who's answering the calls for help. And they continue to come in and say, we're just going to drill another site. These things become very difficult, and you get very aggressive in the process to educate others about the importance of our community and that we deserve to live our life into the future as our elders have taught us how to feed our families in our lands and waters with the traditions that have carried us into the future. We want to be who we are here in Nooksville.
Mm-hmm. Rosemary, we're going to pivot here in just a moment to another topic, but before we do that, I want to ask you one last question, and I would like to learn more about what it was like when you were the mayor in Nooksut and other leadership positions you've held, and how managing caribou during the Willow Project has been impacted during those 10 years you had in these different roles?
The politics of the process became so heightened that it really was pitching community members against community members. And it became very difficult to try to continue to stand on the importance of the issues that the elders taught me were important to stand upon. There was a lot of backlash that happened with the political structures around creating defamation of character of people who stood up and asked questions, belittling the leadership because we questioned the process in the meeting when they put words on paper and every one of the mitigating measures fails to meet the need to mitigate. You spend hours and hours evaluating every one of these mitigations and educating the state and federal government about the need to mitigate, and yet they just take a pen and wipe it out of the books like it never occurred, and it's been decades of engagement. So even to the point where a smear campaign happened, calling you a liar in a public hearing and sending that calling me a liar in a public hearing around to legislative decision makers to try to deface the value of what I have to say. It's not easy to walk through that kind of political strain, but it's not only to me, it's also to family members. My sister lost Service Area 10 Utility Board position the first time I testified in D.C. One of my nephews became a security guard, and he was laid off 13 times when the ice road is just starting to develop. It wasn't that he couldn't do the job. It was that he was part of my family, and they were afraid he might witness or hear something and speak to me about it, so they kept laying him off. You don't get housing, you don't get scholarships, you don't get jobs, you don't get training opportunities. It's not an easy process to stand up in this.
It doesn't sound like it. Not at all, Rosemary. Really admire all of your fortitude and all of your perseverance. And thanks again for coming on the show. You've been great in helping to educate our listeners.
All right, great. Listen, and we appreciate everyone. I have submitted comments. We encourage people to think about what is occurring. Educate your communities, because the Arctic doesn't just stay in the Arctic. When your communities are changing your lands and waters and you're creating infrastructure, it requires energy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you very much. 1-800-99-NATIVE for listeners who would like to join our conversation. We're going to take a break here in a few minutes, but what we're going to do is talk about a longtime indigenous climate advocate in Russia. That will be the next part of our show, the remainder of our show. And this person's name, Daria Gegidova, who is in jail and facing a potential prison sentence of 20 years. Gegidova is Selkup, which is an indigenous group of people in Siberia, and she is the co-chair of the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change, and this is an organization that represents indigenous people on climate change issues at the United Nations. The organization says Daria was arrested and charged with participating in what they call a terrorist organization in direct retaliation for her indigenous rights advocacy. To talk more about this, we have two indigenous rights advocates formerly from Russia who knew Gegidova, and we're going to begin with Ivana and Minko, who joins us now on Zoom from Armenia. She is a Yupik climate researcher. Ivana, hello, and thanks for joining us today.
Hello.
Ivana, we've got about 2 minutes before we have to take our first break, but let's get this conversation started. What can you tell us about Daria? What is she known for?
Daria is a known indigenous climate advocate and a person who was engaged in the UN climate-related issues.
Now, she was just arrested. Did that surprise you and others?
Yes, it did surprise me, and I think nobody expected that a peaceful work or such as indigenous advocacy can turn into such reprisals.
Mm-hmm. We'll take a short break, and we'll come back and we'll talk more with Ivana. And again, the subject here is Daria Gegidova, who is an indigenous climate advocate in Russia, currently in jail and facing a very, very lengthy potential prison sentence. So we'll take a short break. We'll come back. We'll talk more. And we've got phone lines open for anyone who would like to join us right now. We're talking about climate issues and events, changes, impacts, policies. Join us, 1-800-996-2848. That's the number to our studio in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have producers who are standing by waiting for you to call us. Share your thoughts with us right now. How do these topics resonate with you in your community? Talking about caribou, talking about subsistence lifestyles, and also now people facing serious ramifications, legal ramifications for activism. Give us a call. We'll be right back.
Support for law and justice-related programming provided by Hobbs, Strauss, Dean & Walker, LLP, a national law firm dedicated to promoting and defending tribal rights for over 40 years. More information available at hobbsstrauss.com.
Need an actionable plan to achieve your goals? Kaufman & Associates strengthens Native organizations through culturally grounded strategic planning. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
Thanks for tuning in today to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce, and we're talking now about the imprisonment of indigenous Russian climate activist Daria Gegidova. She faces terrorism charges after advocating for including indigenous women's voices in climate change policy negotiations at the United Nations Summit in Brazil. If you'd like to contribute to our conversation, you can do so by calling us now. The number is 1-800-996-2848. Again, that number, 1-800-996-2848. I have another guest who I'd like to introduce now, who joins us from Honolulu, Hawaii. Luda Kinnock. She is a Yupik indigenous rights activist, and she joins us now. Luda, welcome to the show, and please feel free to further introduce yourself to our guests.
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. Hi, my Yupik name is Ilutak. My clan's name is Lakabi, and my tribe is called Yupik. In Alaska, they're more known as Siberian Yupik. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Now, Daria is facing terrorism charges. What are Russian authorities saying? What kind of details or facts or suspicions do they have that link her to terrorism?
Well, climate activism itself does not threaten the politician, even Russian politician, not through violence, not through instability. I think it challenges the economic model. You know, it's not a secret that post-USSR and Russia itself isolated itself for many, many years. And the only viable resource that they have are the fossil fuel that within the Siberia and the whole Arctic zone. So the climate activism challenges that model that build on a large scale instruction. And I think indigenous climate activism draw that attention on environmental damage, loss of the land, human rights violation, and most importantly, it challenges the idealism that Russia relies on. if indigenous people outside of Russia show on such stages as UN and saying, we have a problem here, it's no longer a domestic issue for Russians. It's an international issue and draws so much attention. So that would be my input on that.
Thanks, Luda. Now, the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change, they said that Daria and other indigenous leaders in Russia, they were targeted. They had their homes raided, electronic devices confiscated. Do climate activists typically face these types of repercussions in Russia?
Yeah, I would say yes and no. From my personal experience, I had to request asylum almost 20 years ago. So it was happening behind the closed doors, sadly. Just, like being born as a Yupik on the edge between USSR back then and United States, it was already a statement because my grandfather believed to protect the land, we are the stewards, because my grandfather cared for the clear, pure, non-contaminated river water, freshwater sources, tundra, whales, being an indigenous anywhere. I think it's a statement, and I believe we, as indigenous people around the world, been sort of like involved in the invisible war, if I may say, war in a global race for the resources. So being indigenous, even though we did not contribute to the climate change, but we are the first people who are on the front line suffering from that. And Daria and many others, they have spoke about it. And it's not a threat. It's a responsibility. It's not extremism. It's a survival. It's not ideology. Advocating for indigenous land is not ideology. It's a survival. It's a mere survival for people anywhere, including Russia.
And Luda, for Yupik people who lived under the era of the USSR and now live under the current Russian government, how much has changed? Is it better? Is it worse? Is it the same? I'm curious to know.
Well, people who lived under such idealistic, psychological, linguistic, cultural vacuum and pressure at some point can't even feel the weight of that pressure anymore. We lived in the vacuum, like as Yupik people of the indigenous people of the Arctic, like Inupiaq in Alaska, Inuit in Greenland and Canada, they have each other. Their borders are open. We lived in the vacuum for so long, for over 100 years, and yet still identify as Yupik people. So it's hard to say how our rights are being violated here, because being inside, we stop feeling the pain. We can't see what's happening. It took me 20 years to live outside of that pressure to actually see, we're in trouble there. Trouble is actually very, mild word description.
Well, one thing, going back to Daria, one thing that I've really learned, I think a lot of people have learned, is that activists are not generally targeted unless people are paying attention, unless people are listening to them, unless they are becoming vocal and they're getting a lot of people engaged. Do you feel in any way that Daria's arrest means she was having some sort of effect? She was moving the needle, so to speak, in terms of these issues we're talking about?
Yes, I do believe that climate activism combined with indigenous rights activism, they're not necessarily a threat, or maybe they're a threat because they are effective. They are effective, and Daria's work was effective. We can see the impact of her work and what she has done throughout the years. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Luda. Ivana, I want to go back to you and talk a little bit about your background. You're no longer in Russia. Why is that? Did you leave out of fear of persecution?
I'd prefer to leave that beyond the conversation because
Okay.
these were more the personal motives.
Okay. Well, tell us your thoughts about indigenous people, the indigenous people that Daria comes from, and how they're regarded in Russia.
Well, it's indigenous peoples. I can say that the rights of indigenous peoples or problems of indigenous peoples are not widely discussed topics in the Russian society.
Okay. What are some climate threats currently impacting your community?
Well, if we talk about the region where I come from, the communities there are vulnerable because the climate change and environmental harms, they often happen far from media attention and any legal oversight. So climate issues, they are not separate from social and economic issues. And climate change affect housing, transportation, the traditional activities like reindeer herding and hunting, safety, access to food. So climate advocacy, like Luda said, is often about survival, not ideology.
Mm-hmm. Russia is a huge country. Lots of different types of terrain. Give us some perspective here for those of us like myself who've never been to Eastern Europe. Whereabouts is your community located? How large is it? What's the lifestyle like?
The region where I come from is located in the far north eastern part of Russia, and it is very close to Alaska. It has a common border with Alaska, just across the Bering Strait. And it is home to several indigenous peoples, among whom are Yupiks, coastal marine mammal hunters, Chukchis, the reindeer herders. And these are, along with fishing, marine mammal hunt and reindeer herding are two main traditional activities of the indigenous peoples of Chukotka.
Okay, thank you, Ivana. Luda, I want to go back to you and let's talk more about relationships between the Russian government and Yupik people. Do you see any path forward to how to improve those consultations and that sort of diplomacy?
It's hard to say because my region, Chukotka region, is in the past have been heavily militarized. When Nikita Khrushchev came to power, one of his first things that he did, he beefed up the borders. And around my village, Pravedenia village, we had 14 military bases. So having such a heavy governmental presence and surveillance draws so much attention on Yupik people. Plus, Yupik people, probably one of the few, if not the only ethnic group in Russia that is blood related to Alaskans and Inuit people in other countries that always have been seen as antagonistic countries to USSR and now Russia. So, like I said, just being a Yupik or a native person has always been a statement. And right now, our voices, I wouldn't say completely shut down, but there are no platforms or ways for us how to raise awareness of our condition and what we're going through. So I appreciate this opportunity.
Luda, Daria is facing a 20-year prison sentence. What do you think the chances are that she'll actually be imprisoned and for that length of time?
nobody knows, and actually I would refrain reflecting on that, not to draw any more problems, we all hoping for the best.
Yeah. Any precedent for what you're seeing here in terms of persecution of activists?
Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yeah. Can we look at any other precedents for activists being persecuted to the extent that Daria is right now? I mean, I still can't get over that 20-year possible prison sentence here.
Yes. I think raising awareness on different platforms might have help, and hoping there will be less and less raids and especially imprisonments. But in cases like this, you would never know. So once again, I cannot tell. Yeah, simply can't tell.
And for others who might want to be activists or who might want to bring some of these climate issues into the public, do you think what's happening now with Daria, do you think this is possibly silencing some of those folks? And if so, what do you see for the future?
Well, me personally, I can't speak for others. If I care for my culture, if I care for my land, my people, my traditions, unfortunately, it just becomes political in this world, So I'm not asking, to jump in the boat, with me or anybody else, but I want my tradition to continue. When I was born, there was 2,000 of us. Today it's 1,400. And I'm not 50 years old yet. Somebody has to say something. And I want my people to live on this land like everybody else. And I want to continue practice my culture. And I have responsibility. I hope it answers the question in some way.
Yeah, it does, Luda. And I'm also interested, what about other people in Russia who are not Yupik? Do you see the risk for those folks increasing as well, who might be speaking out or might be advocating for climate issues?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
All right. Well, we're just about out of time, so we're going to have to wind down this show. But really appreciate all the guests who joined us and covered a lot of ground here today on Native America Calling, talking about protections being removed in Alaska and the impact potentially on a caribou herd, and also here, climate activism in Russia facing serious legal implications, ramifications in a big way. And so thank you very much for the guests who joined us, Rosemary Atongarak, Luda Kinnock, and Ivana and Minko. Appreciate all the time you spent with our listeners today, bringing us up to speed and educating us on these important issues. And just because the show ends doesn't mean the conversation, the dialogue has to end. So please feel free to engage with us on our social media platforms. You can go to Facebook or Instagram or Blue Sky or Threads, or you can also go to our website, nativeamericacalling.com. Comment on this show, what you liked about it, what you learned from today, and what other topics you would like us to talk about and feature here on Native America Calling. And, of course, don't forget to join us again tomorrow when we will preview a handful of new art exhibitions that use contemporary creative expressions to reflect traditional Native ideas. I'm Sean Spruce. You've been listening to the one, the only Native America Calling.
The faculty of tribal colleges and universities support their students in countless ways. They say I believe and offer help before it's asked.
Hear that? That's everything tribal college faculty do for their students on Fast Forward. Because if one tried to say it in real time, they'd be here all day. They teach, guide, comfort, and connect. And for that, the community is grateful. Learn more at mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
They give extensions. Cheer progress, share laughter, create calm, and allow reflection. Inspire hope, share wisdom, guide gently, validate feelings.
Every family caregiver could use help finding the necessary resources to care for their loved one. The AARP Family Caregiver Resource Guide helps family caregivers access key programs, services, and agencies in their communities. A copy of the guide is available by calling 877-333-5885 or online at aarp.org/caregiverresources. AARP supports this show.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.